Hi guys, welcome back to Lewis on Film with me, Lewis, and I'm very excited today because today I get to talk about a film that I was very much looking forward to, which was, of course, it was delayed from last year with the COVID pandemic. It just landed in the UK on Netflix and it's called News of the World, starring Tom Hanks. So, as I say, I was really looking forward to this one. I was excited for this one. I've been long looking forward to it. First of all, I'm a massive Western buff. Tom Hanks rarely makes a bad film. He's reunited with Paul Greengrass, of course. They did Captain Phillips together, which, great film. And Netflix is doing some interesting things for Westerns at the moment. Obviously, a couple of years ago, it released The Ballad of Buster Scruggs exclusively, which was my favourite film from a couple of years ago. I'm looking forward to their next Western, which is the Idris Elba Western called The Harder They Fall. Looking forward to that one. And now they've picked up this one for international release. Obviously, it got delayed. It was meant to go to the cinema. But obviously COVID put a halt to that. Now, that's about the only qualm I have, and I keep having this qualm, that it's a film that you feel needs to be a cinema film. You need to see it on a big screen and get the whole experience of the scope of it. Yes, that's definitely true. But I'm still very grateful that they released it and I got to see it. So let's take a look. The film itself, then, it follows Tom Hanks and he plays a man called Captain Kidd, Captain Jefferson Kidd, and he basically goes around different towns across the Wild West reading the news. And anyone who wants to listen, they pay 10 cents and throw it into a cup on the way in, and he reads the news to them in the different editions of the newspaper that are out there. Obviously, they wouldn't have been common back then. Now he says it's because obviously they've got a lot to do and they haven't got time to sit and read the news themselves, so he reads them for them. Now, I think the real reason is because they can't read, to be blunt about it, but that's okay. He kind of makes them feel good about themselves in that regard. But on his way to his sort of next town reading, wherever it may be, he stumbles across a wagon that's been overturned and a dead black gentleman hung from the tree with a rather disrespectful note attached to his chest. And there's a little girl who's lost, and he basically says he'll take her to the next town so they can take her to wherever she belongs. And ultimately, he ends up having to take her all the way there. And it's the story of their journey, their friendship, and how they develop and take care of each other. And yeah, it's a lovely little story. So the good about this, then, is I think it's absolutely wonderful that there's a story like this. That there is somebody who would go around reading the news to people. That's absolutely wonderful. It's not something that it ever occurred to me would be a thing, but it probably was. It's one of those stories that, okay, it may not be a true story, but you can absolutely believe that there were people who would have had to have done that. As I've said, the reason being is because the majority of people couldn't read and they want to get the news out there. So yeah, they'd send somebody to read to the town, and that makes sense. That's a great story and a great new story to use in the Wild West. It's not one that I've ever seen in all the westerns I've watched. So I was very interested in this story, in this character, and that's wonderful. It's a great fresh take for the Wild West, which is, it's the reason there aren't many westerns anymore is because they got tiresome and they didn't explore new territory. This is new territory for the West, and that's great. So that was one of the things I was really interested in was to see that. I guess the sort of example here is, when you find a film that has someone who does something that you thought, oh yeah, that must be a thing. Sunshine Cleaning is a good example, which is the Amy Adams film, and it's about two sisters who they run a sunshine cleaning service, which is where they clean up after a crime has been committed. So, for example, if a murder's been committed, the police have come in, the forensics have come in, they've taken all the evidence, but there's still blood all over the walls and stuff like that, and the girls come in and clean that. And it makes sense, like, oh yeah, there must be someone who does that, but the police don't do it, the forensic team don't do it, they hire in a cleaning service who do it, and it's their story, and that's great. I like that film can do that. It can find an interesting story about an interesting character, an interesting job that they do, and that's what this is. It's that kind of thing. And of course, it stars Tom Hanks. He's never not good, is he? I mean, he's always worth watching. He's a lot of people's favourite actor for a very good reason. He makes good films, and this is no different. And also, it's his very first Western as well, which I find interesting. I find absolutely fascinating. In fact, obviously, he's had a 40-year plus career, and he's never done a Western, which is, it's great. It's great to see him still trying new things. And yeah, so here we are, and. Yeah, he leads this perfectly. He's got a fantastic voice for it. He's got the fantastic experience and nuance about him that he's just able to carry these sorts of roles, and he does so. He does so beautifully. Backing him up is the recently Golden Globe nominated youngster who's called Helena Zengel, who's a German actress, and she plays the girl who he finds. And she's been raised by the Kiowa, who's a sort of Indian tribe. So she doesn't speak English, she doesn't speak any of her native, which is the German, and so Tom Hanks struggles to connect with her in the first instance, but slowly and surely they find a way to sort of build their communication, which allows us more into the story and into the characters. But yeah, so she's been raised by the Kiowa, so she's quite wild and doesn't really understand the way of the world as she's seen it. So she offers interesting things that go on throughout the story. You think she's going to do one thing, she ends up doing something else, which eventually it adds to the tension. Like, what is she going to do next? Because we assume she's just going to try and leg it every time, but she doesn't. She builds, she warms to him, and that becomes more part of the story. Now, I want to say this. Yes, I was excited about this film. Yes, I was looking forward to it, but I didn't see a trailer. The only thing I knew about this film was it was a Western, directed by Paul Greengrass, starring Tom Hanks, and I'd heard from reading an article, which part of me sort of semi-wishes I hadn't, but I suppose it was inevitable, that the plot was that a man finds a girl and he tries to take her home. And that was all I knew going into this. I didn't know nothing else whatsoever. But when I say that the predictability of that story plays out exactly as it's supposed to, I don't mean that in a bad way. Lord of the Rings, for example, is predictable. We all knew how it was going to end, even if we sort of want to say we didn't. The whole good conquers evil thing. We knew Lord of the Rings was going to end the way it did. But this film ends... Without seeing it, I knew how this film was going to end. I knew how the last 10 minutes would pan out. And I was completely correct. But that's okay. Sometimes you can have a film that's predictable, but you enjoy the journey. And that's kind of the point here. You, as long as you enjoy the journey and engage with the journey, then you've ticked all the boxes that you need to tick. And then the story happens that you sort of... The what you know is going to happen inevitably. So yeah, it although it is predictable, it's the good kind of predictable. It's a pleasant story that you kind of, okay, look, this doesn't take much effort for me to enjoy. I'm just going to sit here, know sort of where this is going, and just enjoy what's coming at me. So the bad. I would love to tell you that there isn't a lot. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people will disagree with me on this one, and you're welcome to. But personally, I really, really enjoyed it. It's not a fast-paced action movie by any means, and it's a road movie, which kind of adds more to it as well, as we get to know the characters from the journey, like I said. But equally, it's not a fast-paced movie, and I think a lot of people might be going, ugh, get on with it, get on with it, get on with it. I disagree with that. I think it's really nicely paced, and the more we learn, the better, to an extent. And in actual fact, we don't learn a lot. We're not given sort of any real inkling to the backstory. We just kind of learn little bits of information here and there that's enough to warrant and to satisfy our need to know what actually did happen to this person and that person. Why is he here? Why is he not? Why is he not with his wife, for example, which is part of the story? So yeah, that's the thing. But I think a lot of people will be put off the slow burn pace of it, which is a real shame because it is not a downside at all. But what is a downside in this regard is the fact that the decision making is frequently hard to swallow. So, for example, there's a scene where a guy tries to buy the young girl from him. He says, "Look, she's no kin to you. Just I'll buy her off you, and whatever." And he says no. Of course, he says no, and he quickly leaves town, which doesn't seem sensible because out on the road is where they can get you. In town, you've got the law, you've got the soldiers, you can hide somewhere. Out on the road, there's no hiding. You've got that's so that I was kind of annoyed by that. And then, as well as that, once we kind of get to the scenes where there is a little bit of tension, a little bit of action, that it's all talk. There isn't really much action in that regard, and it does leave you feeling a little bit flat, especially when you go into a western and you like the shootouts, because I know a lot of people do. But equally, that wasn't a bad thing in terms of the way the character is. Ultimately, like I said, by the end, you kind of accept that that's the way he is, and that's okay. But equally, the all talk, no action is kind of the opposite of the West in a way. It's sort of evolved into that more than how it was back in the day. Back in the day, it was more about that than now. They try and sort of talk the way out of things, and they tell you why they want to shoot you. Is the thing. Whereas back in the day, like I say, that wasn't the case. But as I've said, these are all little details of the bad, which I don't think there was much of. The only sort of major criticism I have is that, like I say, I just felt a little bit flat by just the middle section of the film, and the fact that this tension is built and these things could happen that don't ever really amount to much. But like I say, I did enjoy it, and the good more than outweighs the bad. So overall, like I say, I expected to enjoy this. Tom Hanks is an actor who picks good films. He's in a good film. Paul Greengrass is a good director. He's made a good film. Helena Zengel has just been nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress. She deserves it. It looks great. The aesthetics of it are all wonderful. And yeah, it's a nice new tale in the West that's familiar to us now. So I liked it. I expected to like it, and the bad here is minimal to me. I'm happy to sort of say that there are bad things about it, but I was also equally happy to glance over them because the character was so good, so interesting, and because the journey was so nice to look at and so nice to watch. Thank you very much for tuning in, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, as ever, if you've got anything to add, any films that you think I should be checking out, tell me what you think of the reviews. Tell me what you think of the film that I reviewed. I'm very interested to know. And yeah, as always, stay in touch, and I'll see you again next time.